Hello and welcome to Cracking the Cryptic. Now Simon suggested that I have a go at the Daily Telegraph's Diabolical Sudoku today, which is a very hard standard of puzzle. It's a bit experimental this. I'm not very familiar with the Telegraph software or indeed solving really difficult puzzles online. I'm much more used to approaching them on paper, where paper and pencil and the chance to rub out is always available. So here's how I got on. So this is from the blank puzzle. I had one go and struggled with the software and started again. So this is where so we're filling in here according to the method we recommend. Looking at either rows or boxes and finding common numbers in them. So here I've first of all found where 8s have to go in the top 3 boxes, and then where 1s have to go in the top left box. And what we're doing is filling in those squares which are the possibles within one 3x3 box for a certain number. Now I've fixed one correct 1 as it is in that bottom right box, that's certain. Filling in the 5s there. And that 4 has become clear. It had to be there because there's a 4 here ruling out down there. The 1s that we put up there are now resolved because the 4 followed up through the top row and had to be there because of that 4. So there are some numbers even in a Diabolical Sudoku that you can find reasonably fast and put in before you have to do some serious thinking. That cell there, that 2, that wasn't a 2 ruled out by one of these 2s, but in fact it was the only possible candidate for that cell, which had 8, 4, 3, 1, 7, 6 in the row and 9, 5 in the column. So we are still sometimes looking for those kind of naked singles, as it were. Now 8s here, they're not in the same row or column, but they have to be in one of those 2 cells because of this 8 here, which is ruling out these 3 cells. So that's not normally as powerful a constraint, but it does come into play in this puzzle. What I've been able to identify here, as you can see, is a pair of 1s in this box here, and that's the 1 has to be in one of that pair of cells because of this 1 and this 1, and that's going to prove fairly useful. That 2 took a long time to come, and it was very obvious from the beginning, but there we go. And now we're beginning to make some progress here over the left. 2 had to go in the bottom box there, and placing where the 2s might be up here, one of those 2 cells. There's a reasonably interesting point coming up, and I think yes, now that we've got that 2 fixed there, these 2 cells here have to be 1 and 7. Similarly to that 8 on the other side, that restricts those 2 to 5 and 9. But these 2 cells being 1 and 7 is going to lead to a possibility relating to uniqueness. And that comes when I spot in a while that this 1 and this 1 and this 1 limit 1s to those 2 cells. Now, because there's a 1 in those 2 cells, I now know there can't be a 7 in one of those 2 cells. And the reason is this, that if there was a 7 in one of these 2 cells with the 1 in here, those 2 cells would have to be 1 and 7. These 2 cells would have to be 1 and 7. And there would be no way to resolve the puzzle so that there was a unique solution. And they must have given us a puzzle with a unique solution. But if they were both 1 and 7 and these were 1 and 7, then that could be 7, 1, 7, 1, or 1, 7, 1, 7. So I know from that uniqueness constraint that these couldn't be a 7. That means that one of these 2 cells, which we already knew contained an 8, must also contain a 7. So that somewhat limited what what can be going on now. So I have a 7 and an 8 there with the 4, 3, 2, 6. So these three cells must actually be 1, 5, and 9. It took me a long time to see that this cell up here had to be the 7 because of the 7 here and the 7 here. I don't think I've still spotted it at this stage, but once I do, I'm able to make a bit more progress. But the very fact that we were able to use that uniqueness constraint was a good start here. However, this is a diabolical puzzle, and that isn't completely taking one out of the woods there either, I'm afraid. And I do something in a little while. I think here is where I'm spotting the 1, 5, 9 must be in these three cells. I do something in a little while that is anathema to a lot of good Sudoku solvers, where I get to a point where I can't see a logical deduction next, and I'd be very fascinated. I'll indicate when that point is. Feel free to stop the video and tell me what logical deduction I could have made. But what I do instead is I make a presumption that I'm prepared to go back and rub out and correct, but I make a presumption and proceed on the basis that an apparent 50-50 shot is right, and see how that does with the rest of the grid. And that's a technique that I think Thomas Snyder calls it bifurcation, and I quite like that because it sounds a bit more scientific than guessing, which is what some of the good Sudoku solvers call it. So here I've kind of limited the possibilities, and this is where I know that 7 can't be in this cell of this box. It must be in one of those two, and I can tell that it would really help if I knew which one 7 was, because I could probably then make some progress with 7s up at the top and really get going. That 7, there it was. That took me a long time to find, and it was obvious from the very beginning. We've got a little box of 4 here with each of them having 2 possibilities. Those 9s, I haven't really limited those 9s. 8s, that 6 has rendered those 6s possible. And that's actually allowed a couple more numbers to go in the central box, but it doesn't actually help dramatically. I think we can limit the 9s and the 8s there, but the 5 in the central box could be in any of the 3 positions at the moment. Don't think we've got close enough to a finish to use Simon's bug principle from a few days ago. And this is where I start considering those 7s. Now, there is a possibility at this point that this cell I'm pointing to now could be 7. So this is not a given cell for me, but this is where I make the presumption that if the 7 in row 8 can't be in one of those two, so it's either there or there. If it's there, how do we go? And that starts fixing things very quickly. As I say, I'm prepared to go back and rub out. The difficulty with software is I have to memorize which cells I've filled in as a consequence of that decision. And doing so, misremembering that could easily lead to just a completely misfilled grid. But once that presumption is made, that 5 is now limiting the 5s in this box here. 5, these 2 cells must be 5 and 9, so that 8 becomes fixed. That resolves this little group of 2 by 2 here that I was mentioning earlier. Now we're getting some rows that are absolutely falling into place. We've got 8 in each of the bottom rows now, so we can 8 numbers, so we can get a 9 and a 3 in there. And with the progress that 7's allowed us to make, now it's still possible at this stage I'm going to suddenly bang up against a contradiction and have to go back and rewind and correct the presumptions. But obviously the further one goes and it seems to be working, the more likely it is that that method has worked. And for me, that's how I achieve speed on difficult puzzles, is by reaching a point at which I'm prepared to make a presumption, making that presumption, being prepared. I'll often change to pencil in a live situation, and being prepared to rub out the pencil and go back and fix what's done. But in this case, it's worked quite neatly. Everything's coming out nicely, and the puzzle is finished as a result. So that was pretty hard. One uniqueness assumption, which is safe, and then one guess, if you like, or bifurcation, which is far from safe. And that's what gets us to the finish. Very diabolical puzzle, and that's how I go about it. So I hope that's of some interest or use to you, and I hope to see you again on Cracking the Cryptic.